Audio Jungle.
Bullshit.
Let's pretend for a moment we've entered a parallel universe, free of bullshit marketing and full of bold solutions. That's what the Don't Be a Bullshit Marketer podcast is all about. Our guest today is Hall of Fame sports writer Mike Mastovich of the Tribune Democrat in Johnstown, PA. And our sights and sounds of marketing will go back in time to when Guns N' Roses' Welcome to the Jungle was rocking the airwaves and greed was good. But first, let's cut the bullshit. Why do so many people not realize there's a cost of doing it yourself? The do-it-yourself mindset is part of our culture. The DIY channel is about how to do it yourself at home. And at work, people think they're decreasing costs and increasing value by doing things in-house. Look, boss, I'm irreplaceable. Some examples of that include having creative work attempted by in-house staff who are not creative professionals, posting a press release on a blog, emailing it to the media, and calling it PR, thinking only, quote, they can do strategy and marketing, and not putting value on marketing intel that shows what customers see and hear. That's all bullshit. Why? Because they've not calculated what the costs of doing it yourself really are. First, there's the your time cost. Estimate the time you and your team will spend on the do-it-yourself project and put a real dollar value on it. Your supposed savings might not match the value of your team's time. Number two, the opportunity cost. You don't have the experience and talent of the experts, so it will take you longer to finish the work. The more time it takes, the more time your competition has to exploit an opportunity. Third is the quality cost. Think of what you and your company do. When your prospective clients follow the do-it-yourself approach, is what they do on their own as good as what you would have done? Fourth is your brand cost. Your personal brand and your company's brand are impacted by just about everything you do. You risk hurting those brands with a DIY approach. And fifth are leadership costs. Strong leadership involves guiding team members both inside and outside your organization. Before you decide to do it yourself, know the true costs and don't be a bullshit marketer. Mike, what do you think about just doing it yourself? Is it bullshit?
Well, I'll tell you what, I've tried this many times when it comes to home improvements, and you hit a lot of things right exactly on point, because I don't have the expertise to do a job like plumbing or lay a carpet or fix a refrigerator. So, it's noble to try to come through and fix those and do your best effort. And if you can, more power to you. But you're exactly right. Sometimes when you try to do those projects in any realm, I'm saying home improvement, marketing, journalism, our stringers, sometimes, it ends up costing you more in the long run, both tangible and intangible ways.
It really is, because people don't quite understand those 5 different costs that I mentioned. And with our respect to messaging, journalism, PR, advertising, branding, marketing, people don't understand there's an art and a science to it. So I do believe it's bullshit to try and do it all by yourself. It's bullshit to try and do a lot of it by yourself. It's not bullshit if you analyze those 5 different costs and come out saying, yeah, I can still save money and time by doing it myself. As mentioned before, Mike Mastovich is a sports writer for the Tribune Democrat in Johnstown, PA. He's been elected to Halls of Fame for his writing and giving back to the community, particularly the sports world. And he's the author of Slap Shots and Snapshots, 50 Seasons of Pro Hockey in Johnstown. And in case you were wondering, yes, he also happens to be my brother. Mike, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Dave.
Sure. Glad to have you. It's the inaugural Don't Be a Bullshit Marketer podcast. So I thought, hey, who better to have on the first time than a legend in the Johnstown sports market who also happens to be my most trusted lifelong friend and brother. So you heard the Cut the Bullshit rant. Let's get right to it. Describe bullshit marketing. What do you consider bullshit marketing? What's an example that made you think someone was a bullshit marketer?
I think you run into it, a lot of times. I view it as the person or the company that's trying to force something upon you. They're trying to make it something it really isn't. And when I say it, I'm talking about a product or a service They're just trying to ram it down your throat, is the cliche people always talk about. And that's what you always get that image of the used car salesman. Poor used car salesmen get that bad rap. But that's kind of where I'm going with it. Like, you see people that just oversell the product, make it out to be something that it isn't, and then for the poor person who falls for that and say buys something and then find out it really isn't what it was all touted out to be. That's what I consider the bullshit marketing.
And that rings true, because if the seller doesn't really think about the customer and make it about them, that's when the customer bought something they didn't really want. And we all love to say yes and hate to say no, but we really hate when we feel like we were taken advantage of, or we feel like we weren't smart in the buying process. So that is bullshit marketing. So now you've earned the chance to be really put on the spot. Think back throughout your career. What's your biggest marketing, messaging, or communications failure? Looking back, when do you think that you might have been a bullshit marketer? And what did you learn that our listeners can take from it?
I'll tell you what, I'm going to look at, you hit on something really good there. I'm going to look broad, big picture here, not just me, but my entire industry. And we've had this discussion many times. Just the newspaper industry in general has changed. There was that time, the golden era, the Citizen Kane era, the whole way up into probably the 60s and 70s, when you had to read that newspaper. You wanted to read the newspaper every day. I remember in our case, there was a race to the kitchen table in the morning before breakfast to see who can get the sports page first. Then the other guy had to eat his cereal and wait for whoever got it to read it. But I mean, papers were that much a part of our fabric of our society. Everybody was reading them. Well, now with the internet age and social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, every other social media you have out there, everything is so quick. Everybody wants instantaneous information. And the newspaper industry has tried its best to adjust. And, we all have internet presences. A lot of our papers, I know here in Johnstown, we've really worked on our website. We've really worked on beefing up how reporters use Twitter. We have used a service called Tout to put short 45-second videos of what we cover. You video a guy talking, or you video an event, put it online. So people are trying to adapt. But I always talk to people about somewhere back in the 90s when the internet first came in, everybody missed the boat. Our product was given away for free. And now anybody who tries to make money off of a newspaper online is looked at like, are you guys crazy? How could you ask for money for this? And they've got to figure out a way in the entire industry how to make money on A, the products, the stories, and B, to sell more advertising, make more money. I always use the example, I say it'd be like me going to Coney Island in Johnstown, which Dave knows, famous hot dog place, and going up to the counter and say, listen, I want a hot dog. I want it free. I want it now. I want a free hot dog. That's how I compare it to people who say, how can you charge to have your stories online? How do you have the gumption to ask us to pay to read something online?
Bullshit.
So I guess that's my rant for the day.
Well, the Mike Maz bullshit rant, we're starting things off great. So let me make a couple of comments, because I think where the newspaper industry, the print industry, struggled was they did try to charge early and then realized you can't. And then they didn't quite adapt. With your paper in particular, being that we have an office in Johnstown, Mass Solutions is a subscriber. We're a subscriber to the Post-Gazette as well. But then we also have people on the team who sometimes just go to postgazette.com and want to read an article and they didn't enter our subscription name. Well, then after they've done that, very quickly scanning articles in the morning, it comes up and becomes cumbersome. It says go back, sign in, etc. And I get that they've got to try to do something, but what I started doing is going to the Tribune Review. And the Tribune Review sends me a link every morning with the top 20 articles. When I click on one, I don't get asked anything. With the Post-Gazette, unless you're a subscriber, you click on that and it tells you you have 2 articles left. So when I look at those 2 approaches, I'm not saying that one is making money more than the other, but as the consumer, the Trib Review is easier for me to use. And I often complain to you over the years how difficult it was to use the Tribune Democrat website.
Well, the one thing I like about what we're doing with our editor, Chip Minnemeyer, and the editors at the Tribune Democrat, we continue constantly. That's in the meetings every week. Just how can we improve the online, and everybody, it's not like everybody has their head in the sand. Everybody's trying things. It's just a matter of finding that right combination that works. And then you've got guys like me who've been there 30 years and 20 years. And then there's the newer generation that's coming up adapts pretty quickly. And us guys that have been there for 20, 30 years, we're learning and adapting. And as soon as everybody gets on the same page, I see some big things happening. That's the exciting part of it. The worrisome part is getting to that point. How do you do it and what's the right formula? And the thing is, at least in our case, and I'm pretty sure throughout the industry, everybody's trying their best at different outlets.
Well, Chip Minnemeyer, the editor of the Tribune Democrat, was with the Tribune Democrat a long time. He was there back when Mike and I were both coming out of college, and he then left to form an internet venture, a journalistic internet venture, and did reasonably well. And I think it was a coup for the Johnstown region to land Chip back, because he is progressive and he does have a lot of ideas. So I think Chip coming back is a good thing, and I think he will continue to try to make the web presence stronger for the Tribune Democrat. So on the converse of bullshit marketing, Mike, if we ask 100 people this next question, we might get 100 different answers, but I want to hear yours. What's your definition of marketing?
Well, I talked about the bad end of it, but I look at marketing as when someone or a company is taking a product or a service and you're spotlighting it. You're pointing out the positives about this product or service. You're trying to, as Mass Solutions often stresses over and over, you're trying to show the person, potential customer, what's in it for them, and how it's going to benefit them, why they can't live without this is the ultimate goal. So, I look at that as, when that's done the right way, it just works for everybody. Put the spotlight on, why do you need it? What can it do for you? How's your life going to get better because you're using this product or service or this person's talent? That's what I look at as marketing.
You mentioned there are some things that I think fall back to making it about them, which through the 70s, 80s, and into the 90s, it was almost like mass production and wasn't making it about them. Making it about the customer wasn't as big as it is now, and now it's just a prerequisite. If you don't have it, you're going to fail. So what has been your most amazing moment in your experience with marketing, messaging, or communications? We asked about your potential failure and what you saw as bullshit marketing. What's your biggest marketing, messaging, or communications success?
I'll tell you, if you have a few seconds, for communications success here, and this is an international one. Now, I've had a lot of experiences with hockey and sports, obviously, but this one was a little bit off the wall, and I'll try to set this up without taking too much time. And this ties back into social media and the internet age. Back at the end of 2012, I received a somewhat strange Facebook direct message to me. It was from a young man about 25 years old who resided in France, and he saw my last name. He must have done a Google, and on Mastovich, my name came up. And he asked me a simple question on Facebook. It was, even though it was written, you could tell it was broken English in writing. And he asked me if I was related to a John C. Mastovich, who died during World War II in battle, in combat, in France after the D-Day invasion, about probably 10 days after D-Day. And the strange thing, as you well know, we grew up in Franklin Borough, which is a small borough, and there were two different Mastovich clans in that borough, which supposedly aren't related, which is, I find that mind-boggling. But anyway, I was not related to this gentleman, John C. Mastovich, and I sent back to the person in France. His name was Jeremy Anderson Bow. I sent Jeremy, who I got to know real well over the next 8 months, said, I'm not related, but I know of this family. I know, where this guy's from. So this starts a months-long between Facebook, email, correspondence. And I went to everybody I knew with the last name Mastovich, who I wasn't related to, asked them, do you know this guy? And I was getting nowhere. And then one day I was at church, and I talked to somebody who didn't have the last name Mastovich, but ironically he had married a Mastovich who I didn't even know of this. And long story short, he said, yeah, that's my Uncle Johnny. I was only 5 years old. I remember sitting there looking at him at the uniform in his uniform before he left. So I connected Jeremy with these people, and the whole story was about a helmet. Getting to the main point, Jeremy is a World War II. He collects items, battlefield items, and he honors the fallen. And he got this helmet given to him for his 25th birthday because his friend knew how much it meant to him. It was in his friend's attic at his grandfather's, where they played as children. They played Army and they wore the helmet. So it's such a long story. And finally, I put the people together. They were setting up, arranging to meet each other. The helmet, they finally got to see John's helmet, it was such an emotional thing. People were breaking down, crying when I was talking to them. And the helmet was put in a museum on the beach for the 1944-2014 anniversary on D-Day. So it took up maybe more time than you wanted there, and I could go on and on about this story, but it ended up being a front page story of the Tribune. We had a picture of the helmet, a picture of the grave site, many pictures of John C. Mastovich, pictures of Jeremy, and photos of the couple who were related to him. And it brought the whole story back together. A relative in Florida dug out all of his Purple Hearts and all of his medals. And that's a heck of an experience.
Mike, that's a great story. And I know you were recognized for that throughout the state with Golden Quill recognition and so forth. And I think it's a heck of a messaging success. And I like how the audience can take away how a lot of serendipity, a lot of things just happening led to this big messaging success for you. And I think that that's one of the takeaways from that, is that the genuineness of it and the transparency made that story real. And in this day and age of fake reality TV still is very sellable. We want the fake reality TV. We don't want to put the word fake in front of it. We call it reality TV when it's fake reality. But still, that's how much we want reality. So I think when you think about the fact that that was a true, genuine, transparent story, that's what helped to make it go viral and resonate.
Exactly. And you hit on something there too. When I first got the emails, I did a lot of checking because I was hoping it wasn't one of these scams where like, hey, send me money. I need, and I checked out Jeremy and I found out, boy, he does this not just for this helmet, but he honors servicemen, so many people. And I knew he was legit.
Well, it wasn't the fake Nigerian scam, which was recognized as the biggest scam in the history of the internet era. So there's another example that I want to touch on, because you are the ringer first guest for our initial episode of the Don't Be a Bullshit Marketer podcast, being that you've been involved with messaging in nonprofit organizations, messaging with the Tribune Democrat, messaging with Mass Solutions, and you've been really successful at it. And another story that I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about would be another example of a Golden Quill award-winning piece was the history of hockey in Johnstown, whereas there's two things I want to touch on. One is the book, and I want to get to the point where you explain how the book was developed, the history of hockey in Johnstown, slapshots and snapshots, but also that piece you did about the Johnstown Chiefs that received the Golden Quill, and give us the background on how that came into fruition.
Yeah, there were several stories on the history of hockey and the Chiefs that received recognition. But the final Johnstown Chiefs game, that was a pretty big event. The Johnstown Chiefs were a pro hockey team, minor league hockey, that played in Johnstown for 22 seasons in what was known as the East Coast Hockey League, later just changed to ECHL. Hockey has been in Johnstown, pro hockey, since 1941-42, and then it really took off from 1950 since then, basically, with a break here or there. So hockey is kind of beloved in this town, and the fan base just unbelievable, knowledgeable of the sport, and just rabid fans, love their players.
I have to stop you to interject there. Talk about how Slapshot became the cult film and being in Johnstown, and then the Kraft Hockeyville as well.
Yeah, well, the Johnstown Jets played in the North American Hockey League, the Pro League, back in the 70s. In the 1974-75 team, went from worst to first in the middle of the season, and they brought in three long-haired, bespectacled brothers. They were in real life, they're called the Carlson brothers. They had a guy named Dave Hansen, a tough guy, and they had a lot of great veterans, like a gentleman named Galen Head, Vern Campagato. But they had a great team, and they just turned it on right around Christmas time, and they ended up winning the title. Well, during this title run, one of the players, his sister, who was a screenwriter, stayed with him and traveled with the team for most of the season. Her name was Nancy Dowd. His name was Ned Dowd. Nancy, if you Google her, she is very well respected, well known screenwriter. So Nancy wrote the script for what turned out to be the Paul Newman movie Slapshot, which came out in '77. And that movie, they say it hit it right on the mark. It uses a lot of vulgar language and some very R-rated scenes in terms of violence in hockey, but they say it hit it right on. So the movie became a cult classic international hit. It's one of the best rated sports movies of all time. And in hockey, it's revered in hockey. Like if you're in the minor leagues driving the 10-hour bus trips to play a game, that movie's always watched. Players still recite the lines. Players, fans, everybody, they know the lines. The Hanson brothers in the movie, which were based on the Carlson brothers in real life, those guys are like, they're infamous, and they've been touring for 20 years. They're still in great shape. They still look just like they did in the movies, and they tour and they do charity work. It's just like legendary in this town. So that brings a whole nother level to Johnstown, and that led to I don't know if we'll talk about this, but Johnstown just won a national vote to be named Kraft Hockeyville, USA. So there's just so much going on with hockey in Johnstown, but it kind of all ties in. Just that gives you the perspective of how big the Chiefs were and how big of a blow it was. That just like in the movie Slapshot, the team relocated south after the 2010. And it was just like a punch in the gut for this community. Well, their last home game was just a huge, huge event, sellout. People from all over came to watch the game. And the newspaper staff, we really went all out, the Tribune, Democrat, and had multiple reporters there, multiple photographers. Really, as they say in the movie Slapshot, Dickie Dunn, the reporter, captured the spirit of the thing. And we produced a lot of articles that really hit home. I was really proud of the game story I wrote and the column. I actually got emotional writing that column, and just even ended it with the one sidebar that Dave and I talked about many times is there's a bunch of rowdy fans at the top of Section 10. And every game, they would wait. I don't know how they did it, but they watched because it's pretty far away from where I sat in the press box. You can see me because it's a small arena. And they waited till I looked like I wasn't paying attention to them or maybe dozing off or something, but they would always chant in unison, "Hi, Mike." And then I would stand up and wave to them, and then they would go crazy. So this went on for at least 10 or 15 years. And then gradually, not as many of them went to the game, so it kind of died down at the end, especially when the team was playing bad. But that last night, I really got emotional. I ended my column with this line where it was almost the end of the game, and they all stood up and they chanted, "Bye, Mike." And it was like hit my heart. I jumped up and waved at them, saluted them one last time. So that was the kind of stuff that went into that package that was a Keystone Award winning package, as well as the Golden Quill. So that was a great team effort by the TD there.
Well, why it's significant to the Don't Be a Bullshit Marketer podcast is this podcast is about telling your story and about messages. And it doesn't matter if you like hockey. It doesn't matter if you even know where Johnstown is. The people that are listening that heard that story took away what happened and were touched emotionally. And that's what great storytelling is all about. You don't have to be passionate about what that person is telling the story about if the story is told in the right way or in a positive way that can make an emotional impact and be memorable. And that's why I talk a lot about focusing on one big idea. I jokingly say the phrase, "What's the big idea?" playing off of that as if we were someone being chastised in the 70s or 80s with a teacher saying, "What's the big idea?" But what I'm saying is, what's your big idea? What's your one major takeaway? Because that's all you have time for with our audience. So think about the Kraft Hockeyville. Explain what happened with that and show how that's all about one big idea.
Sure, and that's what happened after the Johnstown Chiefs left. That was pro hockey. Uh, there was a little gap there. There was a team from Wheeling played a couple of its home games here in pro, and then they were able to have good fortune and land a junior hockey team. They're called the Johnstown Tomahawks, and they're ironically the name of the league they're in is the same name as the league that had the Slapshot team, North American Hockey League, but it's junior. It's not pro. And this, like I said, it's a hockey town. Whenever that team came here, it was embraced. Fans were just so glad to have hockey back, and they really fell in love with the team. It was a whole different ball game, different age group, 17 to 20. It was young kids trying to get into college, basically, whereas the other one was pro, and you're trying to go up the pro ladder. So this team's very community-oriented. They brought in Mario Lemieux, who's a Hall of Famer from the Penguins. They brought in other Penguins. They brought in the Stanley Cup. They have big festivals outside the arena for opening night, fireworks, all kinds of things. So they're very community-oriented. And earlier this year, Kraft, like as in Kraft, macaroni and cheese Kraft products, they have a contest they had in Canada for maybe 6 years called Hockeyville. Well, this was the first year they wanted to have Hockeyville USA, see how it would take off. And the process is you have to have fans submit essays or video essays on why they feel Johnstown should be Hockeyville USA. And the response was overwhelming. And they picked one, and that got Johnstown nominated. Then there was a several weeks process where you had to vote either by internet, texting, or old school people would call in and get a message, and you'd follow the prompts and you vote for your city. Well, I don't think they were ready for Johnstown because, the internet went down multiple times. The phone lines were blown out. It was crazy. So it went through this whole process every week. Johnstown kept advancing. We're thinking, can this be possible? And sure enough, on May 2nd, the last round, they had it on NBC live during the Stanley Cup playoff game. They broke away to Johnstown. There was 3,000 some people in the arena, and they were instructed if a woman held up a green exclamation point, that means you won, and they wanted everybody to freak out. Well, she held up that exclamation point, and that place went nuts. It was so emotional. I mean, I was choking up. I was videotaping it with my phone. It was just a great process, and the whole way through, the whole community came together, and there was so much, as you say, messaging. There were so many points made. We've got to do this. We've got to stick together, stay on message, keep doing what we're doing, and don't give up when these phone lines go down. Don't give up when the internet crashes. It was a great experience to be a part of it. And the Tribune, it was one of those where you're on that fine line. We supported it so much and did so many stories. There was like a story a day. Changed our banner to say Hockeyville USA, right, with Johnstown. We were doing it for the community. Some people might say, hey, you might be crossing that line, but we looked at it was more important to be there for the community. And, we produced a lot of stories that were talking about the history of the town and hockey in the town and Slapshot and so forth.
When you ask yourself, what's the big idea? Johnstown, Pennsylvania is Hockeyville USA, and that illustrates what's the big idea. And for listeners out there, anytime you have to make a speech, a presentation, anytime you have to sell your product, ask yourself, what's the big idea? So Mike, let's move on to your marketing, messaging, or communications tip or tool. Pick a tool or tip that you'd offer to someone that will help them tell their story, craft their message, or communicate to their target audiences. It could be something as simple as use Google Trends to generate content ideas for blog posts, or it could be a tip of how to approach their career since you've been through it and you know how to try to move along. So what's your marketing, messaging, or communications tip or tool for the audience?
Yeah, these would relate to this stuff I was always taught, and it relates to journalism, but I think it crosses over in so many ways. The first one is a simple thing, and I was taught this by my journalism professor. I read it in Dan Rather's book, but it was you got to get the story, get it first, and get it right. Don't sensationalize. Don't try to make the story better than it is. Just tell the truth, get the story. That's the main thing. And then another thing I learned early in my journalism at the Tribune Democrat was you got to be yourself. You don't want to try to be somebody else. We had a great columnist here, and that was here for like 20 years. And if you try to be him, you're not going to be good. You got to be yourself. You do what your niche is. When I first covered Pitt that first year in '87, I was so intimidated by the Post-Gazette and at that time Pittsburgh Press guys, Jerry Dulac, Steve Helmonick, Chuck Finder. Yeah, I'm trying to be like them. I'm trying to write what they're writing. And then I'm thinking, wait, this isn't working for me. Just do what you can do. So you got to do it, get that story, get it first, get it right. And then you got to be yourself while you're doing it.
You got it. You got it. Excellent tip. So now the fun final segment is the sights and sounds of marketing. This episode's sights and sound of marketing begins with the song "Welcome to the Jungle" by Guns N' Roses. And it became sights and sounds of marketing kickoff because PR practitioners, marketing pros, and sales reps sometimes say it's a jungle out there when describing their competitive environment. Hyperbole? Yeah. But when you're selling ideas, products, or services, it is a battle every day. But we bring a lot of the stress on ourselves. We overpromise. Cue Axl Rose. We are the people that can find whatever you may need. We talk about the competition instead of making it about our customers. Welcome to the jungle. Watch it bring you to your knees. We complain when we're in a slump or struggling to find a creative solution or have writer's block. It gets worse here every day. You learn to live like an animal in the jungle where we play. We want it all and don't want them to have it too. You can have anything you want, but you better not take it from me. When we're on a roll, everyone knows it. When you're high, you never ever want to come down. We overpromise in hopes of pleasing or of getting the yes. Rather than admit weaknesses, we take comfort in chinks in our competition's armor. We love the thrill of the sale or creating a cool piece or marketing program, but we aren't disciplined enough to stay positive in a down cycle. We forget that our win doesn't have to mean someone else's loss. In order to avoid these pitfalls, remember why you chose this field. You're in marketing, PR, or sales because of your natural communication skills and creativity. Manage those strengths to avoid the inevitable highs and lows that come with any profession, but particularly with ours. You've heard this multiple times today. Make it about them, your internal or external audiences. Present with confidence, but admit your weaknesses because your audience knows them already anyway. Listen actively and respond with them in mind, not to win a point, and believe in yourself. We get a lot of rejection in this industry, whether it's PR, sales, marketing, journalism, and the fact that we still get out of bed today and move on accounts for something. Mike, your thoughts about surviving in the jungle?
Well, it's like you said, it's a tough world out there. You got to have a thick skin. I mean, and in the industry I'm in, a lot of times you're taking heat from the public, especially now in the internet age. They can really rip you anonymously online. So you got to have that thick skin. And just because somebody says they think you did it wrong, you got to evaluate yourself. And, you know, a lot of times people will be critical of you and you still got it right. So that's what happens when you're dealing with the public. And that's what happens when you're dealing in marketing. You got to believe in yourself and evaluate what you do.
We call it sights and sounds of marketing because it's both sights and sounds. Welcome to the Jungle was a hit in 1987. Some of the other messaging hits that year were, this is your brain. This is drugs. This is your brain on drugs. Phil Simms was the first Super Bowl MVP to say, I'm going to Disney World. On the big screen, Gordon Gekko told us greed was good, and Patrick Swayze said, nobody puts baby in the corner. And President Reagan famously said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. Mike, which of those memorable messages of 1987 is your favorite and why?
I'll tell you what, the favorite would have to be the this is your brain on drugs, because it's such an important message and it's such a memorable message. Here we are, you know, all these years later, and that thing, you could still see that, you know, in your mind clear is when it first came out, and it still rings true. The drug problem is still there, and you still need that message. And of course, the Reagan one was such a big thing historically, and both of those all those are very memorable. But your brain on drugs really just really resonates.
Yes, I agree. And there, at the same time, Nancy Reagan The First Lady Nancy Reagan came up with Just Say No, which is easy, quick, and memorable, so there's a lot of good to that. But because it wasn't quite as impactful and because it seemed a little forced, it didn't have the impact of this is your brain, this is drugs, this is your brain on drugs. And Just Say No was probably made fun of a little bit more. Coming up in that era, I think we both made fun of that a little bit. As we did make fun of Nobody Puts Baby in the Corner.
Yeah.
Sights and Sounds of Marketing, 1987. So, Mike, how can listeners contact you if they'd like to learn more about what you do? And also tell us anything else, like maybe if there's been a reissuing of a book you might have wrote.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, first to contact me, it's first initial last name. So it's M. Mastovich at tribdem.com. I'm also on Twitter, Masty81, and Facebook. And Dave mentioned with the Hockeyville, this all ties into Hockeyville USA, our Tribune Democrat book, 50 Seasons of Professional Hockey in Johnstown, Slapshots and Snapshots. That came out in 2007. Since then, a lot has happened. The Johnstown Chiefs played 3 more seasons and left. The Wheeling Nailers, which also are in the ECHL, played here for 2 years. They played 10 of their games here each year. And then the Tomahawks have been here 3 years. And then you had Hockeyville. And we lost a local icon, a guy that was beloved in the community and was so well known in the hockey world. So we put all of this stuff into an update of the book. And what we did is we kept the original part of the book is going to be left untouched. And then we're adding all of this new stuff as well. And it's going to be a special Hockeyville USA edition of Slapshots and Snapshots. And obviously, we took the 50 years of pro hockey out because now it's been more than 50 years, and also there's amateur hockey here now. So we tweaked the title a little bit. It's coming out. There's going to be an NHL exhibition game here at the War Memorial in Johnstown. It's part of the prize for winning Hockeyville. The Penguins are going to be in the game. They're going to play the Tampa Bay Lightning. And the goal is to have the book available to be sold at that game. They're taking orders online through the newspaper. And through the hard copy of the newspaper right now. There's a discount until August 1st. If you order before August 1st, I believe it's $19.99. So, save $10 there. So that's my pitch.
Mike, thanks for being a part of the inaugural Don't Be a Bullshit Marketer podcast. And I want to thank everyone for joining us for the Don't Be a Bullshit Marketer, your Bold Solutions podcast. Visit boldsolutions.nobs.com for show notes, plus additional marketing and messaging resources. Are you signed up for light reading? You'll receive proven strategies every other week to improve your marketing and transform your message. It really is light, intended to be read in 2 minutes or less, and it just might trigger bright ideas for you. To sign up, visit masssolutions.biz/blog. Remember, ask yourself, what's the big idea? And build your story around the answer. It's all about bold solutions without the BS.